David Pastrnak is not in Detroit for tonight's game against the Red Wings, and a lower body injury suffered last week is clearly worse than hoped. Bruins fans, this just became a real problem.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. This is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. I'm Ian McLaren, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the injury situation with David Pastrnak. He's going to miss his third straight game, was not able to travel to Detroit for tonight's game against the Red Wings. And this is becoming a pretty big concern for the Boston Bruins because no matter how hard they play, no matter how well Jeremy Swayman is standing tall in net, and no matter how many goals Morgan Geekie scores, the Bruins desperately need their best player in order to remain competitive in the Eastern Conference. Speaking of the Eastern Conference, we're expanding our power rankings to include the entire East because major playoff implications with how competitive the Metropolitan Division is. And then later on, we will preview tonight's game against the Red Wings, a rematch of Saturday's pretty spirited tilt in Boston. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this NFL season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live bets all season long. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on socials at Locked NHL Bruins. I, again, am your host, Ian McLaren, and I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team for major outlets for nearly 20 years now. So the Boston Bruins are in Detroit, and they will be taking on the Red Wings in a rematch of Saturday's very entertaining game. Unfortunately, they will once again be without David Pastrnak, who apparently suffered a lower body injury in the final minutes of last week's game against the New York Islanders. Ty Anderson of 98.5, he tried to pinpoint the exact moment. There was a shift late in that game. He had a noticeable struggle when accelerating out of the defensive zone and when approaching the Islander zone. And, you know, who knows what it could be, but clearly of the lower body variety if it's affecting how he is skating. He did get on the ice early Friday morning before being ruled out of the Black Friday game against the Rangers. Saturday's win over Detroit, he had to miss, and he will once again sit tonight's game against the Red Wings, which is a real problem because David Pastrnak is this team's best player. He's their MVP. Jeremy Swayman has been amazing lately. Morgan Geekie leads the NHL in goals, but make no mistake, the Bruins' success hinges on whether or not David Pastrnak is in the lineup and playing at his most effective. This is a guy who hadn't missed a game in over 200 games or something like that. Now he will be missing his third in a row, and Marco Sturm said they're going to see how it is in the next few days. The Bruins later on this week will host the St. Louis Blues and the New Jersey Devils. Next week is a light one with only 2 games on the schedule. So maybe they just shut him down until the week before Christmas. But being without David Pastrnak for, even a small percentage of the season definitely sets them back. Now, there is some good news on the injury front. Casey Middlestat was back in the lineup for the weekend's games after missing over 3 weeks due to injury. Pavel Zacha returned to action on Saturday after missing a game, but doesn't seem as though he's 100%, but still in the lineup. And Victor Arvidsson is likely to be back in the lineup tonight after missing a couple weeks with an injury of his own. They'll see how he felt yesterday, but he should be in tonight. He missed 7 games for the Bruins with a lower body injury sustained in a November 15th win in Montreal. He had been heating up at the time. He had 6 goals over his previous 11 games prior to the injury. And if he is indeed going to be in the lineup, then he will resume his usual spot on the second line along with Pavel Zacha and Casey Mittelstadt. Right now, on the top line, you have Morgan Geekie skating with Elias Lindholm and Alexander Steves occupying the spot normally reserved for David Pastrnak. So clearly, despite how well Steves has been playing as of late, that's a huge downgrade on the first line, where the other 3 lines are pretty much exactly what we expected them to be coming into the season. Mittelstadt, Zacha, Arvidsson on the second line. The third line, which has been maybe one of their best consistently over the course of the last several weeks. Tanner Jeannot, Fraser Minton, Mark Kastelik, and then Marat Husnudinov, Sean Kuraly, and Mikey Eyssimont on the fourth line. Now, when Pastrnak does come back, that's going to make a difficult decision as to who comes out of the lineup. Steves, again, has been pretty effective as of late. Husnudinov was not even that long ago up on the top line, which shows you how much he is thought of by head coach Marco Sturm. So which one of those guys comes out? Of course, there could be some more injuries that pop up to make room. But right now, the big hole is on the first line with Steves replacing Pastrnak. And hopefully he is back sooner than later, because as we'll see in a moment, the Eastern Conference playoff picture is particularly tight, and the Bruins, just without David Pastrnak, would be in real trouble because, of course, they're already without Charlie McAvoy. We talk about the Bruins' core players, the players that have to be in the lineup and at their best in order for this team to succeed. You had, coming into the season, that triumvirate of Pastrnak, Swayman, and McAvoy. I think you can extend that now to include Morgan Geekie. Right now, they have 2 of those guys in the lineup, 2 out, with McAvoy still recovering from that surgery he had to undergo after taking a puck to the face in that November 15th game against the Canadiens. The blue line looking fairly thin at the moment, with both McAvoy and Henry Jokiharju out. You have Hampus Lindholm skating with Andrew Peeke, Michael Callahan with Nikita Zadorov, and then Jonathan Aspero with Mason Lohrei. 2 of those guys were not expected to be in the lineup for any serious length of time. Aspero's been a regular lately. Callahan called up due to the injury to Jokiharju. And the Bruins, in order to succeed, they're going to have to really continue to tighten up defensively, play a full team defense, and as we'll discuss later, they need to stay out of the penalty box in order to succeed tonight against a Red Wings team that has some real weapons on the power play. So that's kind of the latest on the roster, the lineup, Pastrnak injury becoming a major concern. Coming up, we're going to look at the Eastern Conference playoff picture, update the power rankings, and then preview tonight's game against the Detroit Red Wings. The NFL season is shaping up to be a thrilling regular season finale in December, moving into the playoffs. And one big play can suddenly make everything feel different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift. The receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines, player prop updates as the guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and so much more. keeps you locked into every snap and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com, place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. The Eastern Conference playoff picture is just so incredibly tight, and games like tonight against the Red Wings, incredibly pivotal, even in early December, because with the loser point, you can actually lose games and remain productive, like pick up some points, which is really annoying. I don't like it. They should bring back the tie or go to 3-point games. Anyways, the crazy thing with the Atlantic Division right now is that there are no teams below 500, but only one team has a positive goal differential. The Sabres have won a couple games in a row. The Leafs won the other night. They're tied at 500. The Red Wings, Boston's opponent tonight, they have a .538 point percentage, which is below the Bruins, but they have a division worst -12 goal differential. The Lightning at +19. The next closest team is the Florida Panthers at -2. The Bruins currently at -3. Just some crazy results so far in the Atlantic Division, with only, there's 9 points separating the Panthers and Maple Leafs from the first place Lightning. They have a .680 point percentage, and again, the Leafs down in last at 500. So just unbelievable results right now. And if you look at the wild card situation, there's currently 2 metropolitan teams holding those positions. That would be the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers, both of whom are 3 points up on the Ottawa Senators. But both of those teams have more points than second and third in the Atlantic Division, respectively right now, the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens. So you really have to look at the Eastern Conference as a whole, and especially point percentage, where there is no team below 500 in the East and a bunch of metropolitan teams up in the top 8. Right now, in terms of point percentage, don't forget, I said the Bruins are second in the Atlantic in terms of total points. But when it comes to point percentage, they are 12th in the Eastern Conference, or 11th, I should say, ahead of only the Detroit Red Wings, the Florida Panthers, the New York Rangers, and the Sabres and the Maple Leafs. Sabres, Leafs tied at 500, which is bottom in the East. Sabres have one more point, one more game played. Then you have the Rangers at 519, the Panthers at 521, the Red Wings at 538, the Bruins at 556, followed or just above them is the Columbus Blue Jackets at 558, and the New York Islanders tied at 558. Those are the teams currently outside the top 8 in the Eastern Conference. That's not what it looks like when it comes to actual points earned. In terms of total points, the Bruins are in the top 8, potentially a playoff team, but they have played 27 games, which is tied for most in the East, along with the New York Rangers. So they've played more games than anybody else, and therefore they've kind of left more points on the table because they've only accrued 30 points out of a possible 54, which means they have 55.6% of possible points earned so far this season. And that is below 10 other teams in the East, including these are the top 8 teams at the moment, going from 8 to 1. You have the Ottawa Senators, who got Brady Tkachuk back. They lost 2 in a row, but still Then you have the Montreal Canadiens at 6-0-4. The Washington Capitals, who've won 4 in a row, 7-2-1. They've gone from the bottom into the top 8. They're at 6-15. The Philadelphia Flyers, despite losing last night to Pittsburgh, they're in the mix at 6-20, tied with the Penguins, and in the wild card spot, despite being tied for 4th best point percentage in the East. Then you have the New Jersey Devils, who are still up there despite being without Jack Hughes. And then the top 2 teams in the East, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Tampa Bay Lightning. If you kick it over to goal differential, pretty similar results. Washington, Tampa lead the way with plus 19, and they're the 2 hottest teams in the East. 7 wins in a row for the Lightning, 4 in a row for the Capitals. The Hurricanes are plus 16. Then there's a pretty big gap to the next team, which would be the Pittsburgh Penguins at plus 8, the Devils at plus 4, the Flyers at plus 2, and the Rangers at plus 1. Every other team in the East has a negative goal differential, including our Bruins, who are at minus 3. And tonight's opponent, the Detroit Red Wings, by far have the worst goal differential. If we're going bottom to top, Detroit at minus 12, Columbus minus 7, Sabres at minus 6, Senators, Canadiens at minus 5, the last place Leafs at minus 4, then our Bruins at minus 3. It just goes to show you how, I don't want to say competitive because it kind of reeks of mediocrity in the Eastern Conference, but there's a real opportunity here for the Bruins to remain in the playoff mix. I don't think we talked yesterday about the trade deadline and Bruins perhaps being in on Kiefer Sherwood or Connor Garland. I don't think it's hard to really get a gauge on this team without them being at full health. Like if you had Charlie McAvoy, the way he was playing to start the season, David Pastrnak up to his old tricks, combined with the way Jeremy Swayman and Morgan Geekie are playing, like that's the makings of a playoff team, especially with how good the third line has been. The second line had been developing some chemistry prior to the injuries to Middlestat and Arvidsson. The fourth line, very hard to play against. Nikita Zadorov has elevated his game after a disappointing start to his Bruins tenure last year. Elias Lindholm making his presence more felt. Like, if you look at how the East is shaping up, the Bruins at full health could be pretty competitive, or at least a playoff team. I don't know if they would stack up against Tampa, Carolina, Washington maybe in the playoffs, but they should be in the mix for a playoff spot. And that's where I think they want to be. They don't want to be tearing down again. They don't want to be selling off a Pavel Zacha, or maybe Casey Middlestat, Victor Arvidsson couldn't find themselves on the block or in play. Maybe they're not as long-term as a guy like Zacha, who they want to keep around. But they have the makings of a team that is hard to play against, and at full strength, you know, they could surprise some people. And that's why it's tricky right now to really evaluate who this team is because of those injuries, especially to McAvoy and right now David Pastrnak. They just need him in the lineup in order to maximize their potential this season. So hopefully he can come back sooner than later. And of course, there's the Olympic break. A bunch of Bruins will be involved in that. And they can ill afford to have any of their guys super banged up at that event because there's a real chance they could stay in the playoff mix well into March and even April this season if everything continues to go well. But they do have some problems. They need to shore things up at 5-on-5. They've really been dining out on strong goaltending and very high-end special teams. And we'll see where they rank and how they match up against tonight's opponent in the Detroit Red Wings here as the podcast continues. It's just science, folks. When you're hydrated, everything just works better. Focus, energy, mood, even your skin. And that's why people have been using Drip Drop more and more. It's a doctor-developed hydration system that keeps you feeling at full power no matter what your day looks like. It's not your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes, half the sugar of leading brands, and it's using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. Hydration has become non-negotiable. Drip Drop can help you feel sharper, calmer, and honestly just better overall. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off, 20% off, I should say. Stock up now before the holidays hit hard. Keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Bruins Red Wings tonight in the Motor City, and if Saturday's game was any indication, it could be a pretty rough and tumble affair. There were quite a few big hits, some fights, highlighted by Mark Kaslick and Mo Sider, and that's the beauty of these home and homes with a division rival. You know, when the NHL switched to this division format, they were really promoting that it would be developing some rivalries. We don't see that as much in the regular season because of the balanced schedule. It comes out more in the playoffs because you're forced to play against division teams year in and year out. But there's a real opportunity here for the quick turnaround, home and home, a heated game in the first one, a win for the Bruins in a shootout, followed by this game in Detroit in which the Red Wings, who have lost 4 in a row, will be looking to get back on track. The Red Wings are 13, 11, and 2. The Bruins are 15 and 12. It's the second of 4 meetings between these two teams. And right now, the goaltending battle really favors the Bruins. Jeremy Swayman has been red hot, .935 save percentage in November, a .915 save percentage for the season, 11-6 record. He's really putting himself back in the Vezina conversation if he keeps this up. The Red Wings, on the other hand, their tandem of Cam Talbot, John Gibson, combining for an .872 save percentage, 3.38 goals against average, and pretty leaky so far this season, and that's something the Bruins can take advantage of. The Red Wings are led in scoring over their past 5 games by Dylan Larkin and Patrick Kane. They got 5 points apiece. Alex DeBrincat with 3 goals. For the Bruins, Morgan Geekie's got 6 goals in his past 5 games. Elias Lindholm has quietly chipped in 4 assists since his return to lead the Bruins in that stat over the past 5. When it comes to special teams, that is a huge advantage for the Bruins. Right now, they have the 4th ranked power play, and the hiring of Steve Spott by Marco Sturm, in addition to the coaching staff, is looking genius at the moment. Their power play last year was abysmal, and right now it is 4th ranked. The Red Wings are 13th ranked, so not too bad, and they do have some weapons. So the Bruins have to stay out of the penalty box, even though their penalty kill is ranked 7th, which is pretty remarkable considering how much work they've had to put in. The Red Wings penalty kill ranks 23rd at 78.9%. Face-offs, both teams pretty equal in the dot, ranking 11th, the Bruins, 8th for the Red Wings. When it comes to goals for and against, the Bruins trump Detroit in both of these categories. They have a 3 goal per game average, the Bruins do, ranking 18th in the NHL, but they're allowing 3.19 goals per game, which puts them at 20th. The Red Wings, 22nd, averaging 2.88 goals per game, and they're 26th, allowing 3.38 goals per game. The Bruins, though, again, are really thriving when it comes to save percentage and their special teams, because at 5-on-5, they're not particularly strong, and they're being outscored pretty regularly at even strength, or when playing at 5-on-5. When it comes to goals for at 5-on-5, the Bruins rank 22nd with a differential of 48.04%. They've scored 49 goals, but they've allowed 53. If you kick that up to all strengths, however, the Bruins, let's see how they stack up here. All strengths, the Bruins are 21st, because they have scored 81 goals, but they've allowed 86. Expected goals, they have a differential of 43.92, meaning the other team is generating more opportunities than the Bruins are. They're being carried by a pretty strong save percentage and perhaps an elevated shooting percentage, and that's a result of them succeeding on the power play. So tonight they really need to, this has been one of the biggest problems for this team so far this season is their penalty trouble. If you look at the penalty stats and penalty kill time, they have taken accrued 339 penalty minutes, an average of 12.33 penalty minutes per game. They've taken 138 penalties, which is well more than Calgary, who's only at 119. And their net penalty rating, which is penalties taken versus penalties drawn, is at -22. So despite the fact that the penalty kill has been pretty strong for this team, they're regularly being overworked as a result of Boston taking so many penalties, and they have to cut that down, even though the penalty kill unit has been pretty strong so far. So the big takeaways: Victor Arvidsson likely back tonight, a full complement of their bottom nine, with Alex Steeves rocking it on the top line with Elias Lindholm and Morgan Geekie. Defense still banged up with McAvoy and Jokiharju out. They need to lean on Jeremy Swayman. He's been playing so much better than Joonas Korpisalo, and they need to just continue to ride him right now because he gives them the best chance to win night in and night out. Eastern Conference, very open, and the Bruins have an opportunity to make the playoffs this season. I truly believe that, if they can get everybody back healthy and tighten things up discipline-wise, continue to get those strong special teams and goaltending. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you for making it your first listen. Thank you for everydayers out there who subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. You can find it on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.